Hi everyone, Chapter 14, Landry News. Law for all for law. Question 1. Why was Mr. Larson giving a surprise lesson on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? Question 2. Choose the type of figurative language used in Chapter 14 in this excerpt. Mr. Larson picked his way through the clutter to go back to his desk. He used the pointer like a gentleman's cane. He used the pointer like a gentleman's cane. Using that, is that a hyperbole, a simile, a metaphor? Ready? Law for all for law. When the afternoon class came whooping into room 145 on Wednesday, the kids were supposed to see a TV and a VCR on a cart and Mr. Larson at his desk. And they saw a Mr. Larson that they had never seen before. When everyone quieted down, Mr. Larson said, "I know you all need to get right to work on your newspaper, but first, I want you to watch something I taped on TV last night." He pushed the play button, and the talk show host told a joke about the president and the vice president telling lies to each other. The audience laughed and clapped. Mr. Larson shut off the TV and pushed the cart aside. He pulled down a rolled-up map of the world and tapped the black tip of the pointer onto different countries as he spoke. Mr. Larson said, "If the comedian lived in this country, or in this country, and he told that joke, he would probably be in jail tonight." Pausing for dramatic effect, Mr. Larson moved his pointer to another country, and he said, "And if a comedian lived in this country and told that joke, he probably could not be ever to be seen or heard from again." Moving to the pointer to the United States, Mr. Larson said, "But, of course, that's comedian lives in this country. Today, he will not be jailed. He will not disappear. He has the right to tell jokes and make people laugh." Mr. Larson rolled up the mat and walked to the side of the classroom. Picking his way among stacks of newspapers and magazines and a couple of books, he stood next to the bulletin board. The board was incredibly cluttered, but in the center there was a small poster, and it said, "The Bill of Rights, the 10 original amendments to the Constitution of the United States of America." Mr. Larson put the pointer on the word Constitution and said, "Now, I know we haven't studied the Constitution yet this year, so I'm going to get to the main point as quickly as I can. The Constitution is a list of rules, okay? The list tells us how our country's government is to be set up. When the Constitution was first written down, and some people said it gave too much power to the government and not enough to protect the ordinary people. And these people, and that before they would agree to the rules of the Constitution, there had to be a Bill of Rights, a list of rights that the government could never take away from people. They didn't want the government to start acting like a cruel king. They had already dealt with that before." Mr. Larson tapped on the word amendments. He said, "So, they make some amendments. This word just means changes. The Bill of Rights is contained in these changes. They are now permanent parts of our Constitution." Now, this is the main idea I want you to understand here. They made these 10 original amendments, and even before anyone could agree on the Constitution itself, and the First Amendment is first for a reason. It promises that the government cannot get involved in religion, either for religion or against religion. It promises that people are free to express their opinions and ideas like the comedian did that I taped from last night. And it also says that there is a freedom of press, that the government cannot decide what a newspaper is allowed or not allowed to print. Ed caught on right away, and he held up his hand. "Does that mean we can print anything we want in the Landry News?" he asked. Mr. Larson said, "Good question, Ed. What do you think about that, Kara? Can you print anything that you want in the Landry News?" Kara hesitated. I'm not sure. I mean, I used to put anything I wanted in the newspaper because I made the whole thing from the beginning to end, but now, I guess, if someone didn't like what we wrote, they could keep us from using the printer or the copier. Then Joey said, but if I use my own computer at home and I bought my own paper and everything like that, I could print whatever I wanted, right? Sharon's dad was a lawyer, so she said, yeah, but if you printed a lie about me, my dad would sue you, and then I would own your computer. Mr. Larson said, you've all raised some interesting facts and good points. The fact is, when you publish a newspaper, you do have to tell the truth. If you get caught lying, someone is likely to sue you, take you to court, and like Sharon said. And if a newspaper company publishes the newspaper, then the owner of the newspaper gets to decide what's in the paper. It was quiet for a moment. Then Ed asked the question that was forming in everyone's mind. So, who is the owner of our newspaper? Is it Kara? Kara shook her head. Not really, not anymore. And I feel kind of funny having that still be the name of the newspaper. I think maybe we should change the name or something. Joey said, I don't. You started it. You're the one that is the head. You are the editor-in-chief. So I vote it stays the same. Kara blushed at Joey's little speech and blushed even more when the whole class clapped and cheered. Mr. Larson brought things back to order. So that's settled. Now, back to Ed's question about who owns the newspaper. Leanne? What do you think? Leanne said, well, the school owns the Landry News, right? I mean, the school buys the paper and the computer, and it's also the school's right? Mr. Larson smiled. You could say the owner is the school and that the head of the school is the principal, but the principal is hired by the school board, and the school board is elected by your parents and the other people of Carlington. And there is no one person that pays taxes. Everyone pays taxes, and that pays the principal and the teachers and buys all the paper and the computers and the printers, right? And there is that lesson about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the freedom of the press. Using the printer like a gentleman came, Mr. Larson picked his way through the clutter and back to his desk. We can all hear Mr. Funtel yawning, can't we? Apparently he doesn't like my story about the Bill of Rights. It was quiet for another moment or two, and Kara sat there staring at the Bill of Rights on the bulletin board. And she wondered how much of freedom of the press the Landry News actually had. A little suspicion formed in the back of her mind, and sooner or later she would find out. Now, why do you think Mr. Larson brought this up? What former meeting or what former conversation could have something to do with this? And let me read that little sentence again. Mr. Larson picked his way through the clutter back to his desk, using the pointer like a gentleman's cane. How did he use that pointer? And what part of figurative language was that be? Simile, metaphor, or hyperbole? Have a good night.